الحمد لله بالعالمين نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله صلى الله عليه وعلى آله وأصحابه ومن تبعهم بالإحسان إلى يوم الدين أما بعد. So today inshallah ta'ala we'll be continuing discussing our book Tadlīs Nukhbatul Fikr. So this is the book that was originally authored by Al-Hafiz Ibn Hajar Al-Asqalani rahimahullah ta'ala, one of the ulama of hadith. So we started discussing this book, and we're discussing still matters that the author here he mentioned on the topic regarding as-saqt fil-isnad. So matter regarding asbab ad-da'f al-hadith, reason why hadith is considered to be da'if, and of those things that he mentioned, that of those reasons, as he stated, saqt fil-isnad. So we have covered different types of saqt, that where someone is absent in the isnad, or someone is missing in the isnad, or there's a breakage in the isnad. So they refer to as saqt. So from some of breakage that have occurred inside of the isnad. So we had mentioned in previous sessions hadith al-mursal. We have discussed also hadith al-munqata, hadith al-murdal, hadith al-mu'allaq, and hadith al-munqata, and hadith so those are the ones that we have covered so far in previous lesson. So today inshallah ta'ala we'll be continuing what the author, or continue from where the author have left off. We mentioned saqt as-saqt bi-i'tibar al-wudu. So he mentioned regarding concerning what we have mentioned previous is of previous lessons are cases where saqt have occurred in the isnad, where those things is wadih, jali, zahir. So a breakage that have occurred that is considered to be wadih, jali, zahir, where those things are apparent. And those things are, in most cases, can be detected by most of those who specialize in ilm al-hadith, or those who busy themselves with ilm al-hadith. So those type we mentioned, and those are the previous ones: al-mursal, mu'dal, mu'allaq, munqata. These are saqt jali. These are saqt jali. Then he mentioned that also you find another case, another type of saqt breakage that occur in this. Now to mention al-inqita, as we mentioned al-zahir, that ways of detecting those. They mentioned Adam, Talaqi, where both narrators did not meet at all. Also, way of detecting this is by way of tariq, by way of the history of narrators, by knowing concerning of those narrators are said to be their birth, mawalid, when they were born, and also when they died, and who are the shuyukh that they met, where did they travel. So these are ways of detecting those things. Was he a student of this particular sheikh or not? So there's ways of detecting those that are somewhat more known. Then he mentioned regarding concern that another form of inqita that have occurred, as he mentioned, al-inqita khafi. So a type of inqita, a breakage that have occurred in the isnad, which is khafi. That these are not that as clear. They're somewhat more hidden forms of inqita. They are more subtle. So these are the types that will be discussed in the mention qisman, that these type of inqita that have occurred, a breakage that occur in isnad, or what seem to be a breakage in isnad, but these are more subtle, not easily detected. And he mentioned that is of two types: qisman, mudallis wa mursal al-khafi. Al-mudallis, so mudallis, so regarding case of tadlīs, and also mursal al-khafi. So these will be the type of breakage, or what seem to be breakage in the isnad, but it is not, as mentioned, jali. It's not something which is very clear. So he mentioned, so of the first he mentioned hadith al-mudallis. So in this discussion, we'll be now trying to discuss and explain further these type of inqita that occurs in the isnad that is said to be khafi, either referred to as hadith at-tadlīs or mudallis, or at times, and also the second case is mursal al-khafi. So the first of those is tadlīs. So we'll be discussing inshallah ta'ala in this session that we'll be discussing matters pertaining to at-tadlīs. At-tadlīs, that are the things that we hope to cover which this topic can be somewhat, goes into some detail, that here he mentioned in this talkhis, he mentioned hadith al-mudallis. What is hadith al-mudallis? So discussing the meaning linguistically regarding tadlis, and second, in the meaning in istila ulama al-hadith, in ilm al-mustalah. Also example, also of these type of cases, the different type of anwa, the different categories of tadlis, also, and discussing those different levels, also regarding concerning that those who are said to be mudallis, some example of those who are referred to are said to be people who fall into that category. So inshallah ta'ala, the hukum regarding hadith al-mudallis and the likes. So those are the things that we hope to cover another matter. So this session, it may take up to 2 sessions. So this session may take up to 2 sessions at least. So the first, in starting this discussion, and as we had mentioned, that this is a form of concerning al-inqita, breakage that occur in the hadith. Either it is in the isnad, either something which is wadih, it is something very clear, and those are the ones that we have covered before, of al-mursal, inqita, munqata, hadith munqata, hadith mu'dal, hadith mu'allaq. So these are breakage, inqita, that is wadih, jali, zahir. The other category or other types of inqita that have occurred, as you mentioned here, khafiyya, those that are more subtle, those that are not that clearly detected, they're hidden. So that will be our discussion, and of those category are of what falls into this. You mentioned 2, tadlis, wa mursal, khafi. So starting with the first, which is at-tadlis, will be the topic of our discussion, bi'awnillah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So the first of those things that are covered, that in the books, in discussing concerning al-mudallis. So al-mudallis, what is mudallis? Man dalasa. So let's say that this word dalasa, that it means regarding linguistically, as I mentioned, adam tabeen al-aib. So linguistically, it means adam tabeen al-aib. So that not clarifying the fault, not clarifying a fault. So they mentioned also the linguistic meaning that you go content, as I mentioned, ikhfa, that something is hidden. Also, it means taghtiya, something being covered up. So these are the meaning that it carries. And also, dhalam, of something being covered up dark. So these are of those meanings. So, ikhfa, taghtiya, adam tabeen al-aib. So these are the meaning that it carries linguistically. Also regarding concerning this matter, that next of those matters that is covered, so that's the meaning, the linguistic meaning regarding concerning at-tadlis, that they mentioned regarding concerning that that the rawi akhfa wajh as-sawab fil isnad, that he can somewhat hid concerning matters pertaining to the isnad, what is correct regarding the isnad. Walam yubayyin. So it doesn't make clear what's the reality of the isnad. As for the meaning, tadlis or mudallis, istilahan, in the ulama al-hadith, that you have several meanings that are given. So of those meanings that are mentioned regarding at-tadlis, hadith al-mudallis, that mention huwa al-hadith, of those who have mentioned, the definition could be given as huwa hadith alladhi waqa fihi fi sanadihi tadlis. So of the definition that are given regarding hadith mudallis, huwa hadith is the hadith alladhi waqa fi sanadihi tadlis. So it's a hadith where tadlis, some type of error, is being covered in the hadith, where the error is being hidden in the hadith. That's of the definition that is given regarding hadith to tadlis in general. Then also other definition that I mentioned, huwa ikhfa al-aib fi isnad, is hiding the fault in the isnad, ala wajh yuham salamatu, by way of it seems as if things are okay. I make it seems as if things are okay. من ذلك العيب. From that, so that's concerning of the definition that's given. So hiding the fault in the isnad by way of making it seems as if things are in place. Also of the definition that they have given also وإخفاء العيب في إسناد وتحسين الظاهر. So also another definition, a third definition, هو إخفاء العيب في الإسناد, is hiding the fault in the isnad وتحسين لظاهر, and making it seems as if things apparently is okay. Make things seems apparent that it is okay. That's the general meaning of hadith at-Tadlīs. The next of those things that I mentioned, so at-Tadlīs, that the ulama have mentioned, that this matter, it requires regarding detecting of Tadlīs, at times require a person who is very well grounded and a specialist in the field of hadith. So it requires a person of a sharp eye and a good understanding and well grounded in the field of hadith. As may not be at so it requires a person who's a specialist in this field. They mentioned after this matter regarding at-Tadlīs, what is أقسام التدليس. So next of the matter they discuss Tadlīs, عدة الأقسام. So the ulama have mentioned regarding at-Tadlīs, it have many aqsam, many categories. But of the ulama who have explained Tadlīs by way of how they have divided at-Tadlīs, by way of those who put it into qismain, those who have put it into ثلاثة الأقسام, and those who have gone beyond this. But of the more renowned of the grouping or anwa, the different types or categories of Tadlīs, that the ulama put it into either 2 or 3. So those who put it into 2 categories, as we mentioned, that they mentioned that Tadlīs Al-Isnad wa Tadlīs Al-Shuyukh. That's the 2 categories of those who put it into 2 categories, that they see it as Tadlīs Al-Isnad wa Tadlīs Al-Shuyukh. And of those who put it into those 2 categories, that we find the likes of Khatib al-Baghdadi, Ibn Salah, An-Nawawi, Ibn Kathir, Ibn Malakkin, and others. So of those who categorize Tadlīs into 2 categories, where those 2 categories, and the 2 categories are Tadlīs Al-Isnad and Tadlīs Al-Shuyukh. And also those subdivide, and of those of the ulama who divide it into those 2 categories, as we mentioned, Khatib al-Baghdadi, Ibn Salah, Nawawi, Ibn Kathir, Ibn Malakkin, and others. All of those what we have mentioned have worked in the field of ilm ulum al-hadith or ilm mustalah al-hadith. So then also we have of the ulama who have categorized, sectioned them into 3 sections or 3 areas. And of those they mention al-Iraqi. So Hafiz al-Iraqi, that he mentioned into 3 categories. Those are Tadlīs al-Isnad, second Tadlīs al-Shuyukh, and third Tadlīs al-Taswiyah. The third Tadlīs al-Taswiyah. So that's how some of the ulama have divided. So we can somewhat work with those where of how they have the 2 and then include al-Taswiyah. A Tadlīs, as we mentioned, the ulama have put Tadlīs al-Isnad into, so they discussed concerning Tadlīs al-Isnad, and then they went on to discuss, to explain concerning Tadlīs al-Isnad. Tadlīs al-Isnad. So with Tadlīs al-Isnad, that you find different definitions that are given regarding what is defined as Tadlīs al-Isnad. Different definition that is put forward as to how the ulama define Tadlīs al-Isnad. So that be the first of the categories of Tadlīs. Tadlīs al-Isnad, and also that goes into different categories. So you have several definitions that are given, but of the more renowned definition of Tadlīs al-Isnad, that of those that they have mentioned, Tadlīs al-Isnad, أن يروي الراوي أمن عاصره ولقيه وسمع منه حديثا لم يسمعه منه بصيغة توهم السماع منه. So the first of those definitions that are given regarding hadith Tadlīs al-Isnad, that they mentioned that أن يروي الراوي, so the narrator have narrated أمن عاصره وَلَقِيَهُ وَسَمِعَ مِنْهُ, that he have met this person, he was a contemporary of this person, and also he have heard from this person, and they have met. So the narrator is narrating upon someone that he has met, heard from him, and is of his contemporary. But he have narrated a hadith that he did not hear from him, even though he have heard from this person. That is Tadlīs al-Isnad. So in summary, that this narrator have heard from a sheikh, hadith, X amount of hadith, but in narrating, he have narrated at times a hadith from upon a sheikh that he did not hear from him directly. But he used term that is somewhat make it seems he has heard from him, but not direct. And of those words he will use قال an. So the narrator mentioned an shaykhi. So that's concerning what is referred to as Tadlīs al-Isnad. So again, is a narrator who have heard from a sheikh certain set of hadith, 20 hadith he have heard from his teacher, but then is narrating a hadith that is not from that 20 hadith that he heard from his sheikh. It's narrating something he did not hear from his sheikhs directly, but he used words that make it seems he could or couldn't hear, that he have heard this hadith or not heard this hadith from his sheikh. So the word that it could go this way or that way. And of those words, قال. So that's concerning hadith, what is referred to hadith, Tadlīs al-Isnad. So that's concerning, and I mentioned regarding concerning that as for this type, that is surah, as we mentioned, that that's of the definition that is given. And that per se definition, that that person who have met that person, heard from him, you find the likes of Ibn Hajar and the likes, that they have mentioned that this is Tadlīs al-Isnad. This is Tadlīs al-Isnad. That's the first definition. Another definition that is given by the ulama, that they state that a Tadlīs أن يروي الراوي أمن لقيه, narrate upon someone you have met, سواء سمع منه أو لا, whether the person heard from him or not. حديثا بصيغة توهم السماع منه مسقط شيخه الذي أخذ عنه مباشر عنه. So they mentioned that this definition, again we just explain, أن يروي الراوي أمن لقيه, that narrator he hears from someone he have met, وسمع منه, and also he have heard from him, أو لا, or he didn't hear from him, so he met the person, he may have heard from him, or that narrator may not have heard from him, but he met him. Then he mentioned hadithan, but then he narrate upon him a hadith that seems as if he heard from him. And so that's concerning, so he removed his sheikh, so that's concerning hadith that is said to be hadith Tadlīs al-Isnad. A discussion between the ulama regarding this particular one, where they mentioned that the fact that the person did not hear from him, if one did not hear from him, so they said Tadlīs al-Isnad is that you need to hear of a condition, is that you need to hear from that sheikh. And of those who mention is not a criteria, you have to hear from that sheikh. And that's a discussion between the ulama of the past, of the ulama of old, and the ulama of ulama who came after, latter day scholars. Is this a condition? And of those who make a distinction where they said Tadlīs, Al-Isnad, and Yarwi Rawi, and Man Laqiyahu, وسمع منه لكن يروي حديث لم يسمع منه يوهم أنه سمع منه. So as I said, that is Tadlīs al-Isnad, meaning that the narrator have heard from a sheikh hadith, but in this case is narrating a hadith he did not hear from a sheikh directly, but he used words that could go both ways. قال عن. So that is Tadlīs al-Isnad. That of those, Ibn Hajar al-Asqalani, he naqish, that he discuss regarding others on the matter, or debate with others on the matter, that if the person did not meet him, that a person of the same time, but did not meet him and hear from him, then that's not Tadlīs. That's not Tadlīs. That is Mursal al-Khafi. That goes into a different category. So that's Ibn Hajar regarding of those who have that discussion regarding that they stipulate as a condition for Tadlīs al-Isnad, the person must have met that person, heard from him hadith, but is narrating some hadith on that person that he met and heard from, things that he did not hear from him. That they said it is Tadlīs al-Isnad. As for not meeting the person, then that is not from Tadlīs al-Isnad. So you have that discussion between the ulama on that topic. But of those who mentioned regarding concerns that both these are considered to be Tadlīs, whether the person heard from him or did not, is still considered to be Tadlīs. That they mentioned that of the ulama of past who have somewhat given that understanding, that is stated concerning قول أحمد وابن معين وقال بخاري لا أعرف لسعيد ibn Abi Aruba. We do not know that Sa'id ibn Aruba سماها and Amash, that he heard from Amash, وهو يدلس ويروي عنه, that is يدلس, that he falls into Tadlīs, ويروي عنه, and he heard from him. So they said that the shahid, that Ahmed ibn Ma'in al-Bukhari min ulama al-mutaqaddimin, of the ulama of the past, that they state لا أعرف لسعيد ibn Aruba سماع عن Amash, that he did not hear from Amash. But then they mention وهو يدلس ويروي عنه, but is falling into Tadlīs and also narrating upon him, but they didn't meet. So they said no, for them, that of the ulama of the past, they did not make a distinction between that both words, that Tadlīs al-Isnad, it includes if the person heard or did not hear from that person, but is narrating on him what he did not hear in a manner that seems as if he heard from him. So I said no. So that's concerning a discussion between the ulama. They mentioned of the ulama who kind of mentioned a stipulate that you have to hear from the narrator, of those Shafi in some of his statement, Bazar and others, that they mentioned that in those cases they have mentioned, by way of those cases are that they are mentioned are cases that it does occur but not often. So they mentioned that they're not per se discussing that matter concerning holistically, but in some cases regarding that they stipulate, they mention regarding Tadlīs occurring where the person, he heard from that individual directly, some hadith. So we have that discussion between the ulama. That's somewhat a more technical matter regarding what is said between the path and the approach of the ulama of past and the ulama who came later as to that matter which is more technical. The next of the matter, so as we mentioned regarding a Tadlīs al-Isnad, that an example. So sometimes the example in these cases may be a bit not fully grasped because of there's many diagrams to make things more clearer, to have diagrams of what is being discussed, especially regarding matters regarding Tadlīs. So as we had mentioned, that right, so that's of the example, that's of the some of the definition of other definitions are given, but those are the ones that are the more common example. So the one that are more commonly used regarding Tadlīs is the definition given by Ibn Hajar, or taken up by Ibn Hajar, where he mentioned, he separate between, where he states concerning an yarwi rawi, where a narrator, yarwi an man sami'a minhu, that he narrates upon a person that he have heard from, hadith, mimma lam yasma minhu, ma lam yasma minhu, what he, that he narrates things that he didn't hear from him. Yuham as-sama, that give the impression he heard from him. So he stipulate that for him, Tadlīs, Al-Isnad, that a person narrator, the student he heard from his sheikh, some hadith, as we mentioned before, 20 hadith, but then in this case of Tadlīs, he's narrating that which he did not heard from his sheikh, and may have heard from some other person through his sheikh, but then he makes it seem as if he's hearing that he heard from his sheikh. That's concerning Tadlīs. An example of this, that they mentioned an example of Tadlīs al-Isnad, مثاله ما راه أربع عن ابن شهاب يعني الزهري عن أبي سلمة عن عائشة رضي الله عنها قالت قال رسول الله عليه السلام لا نظر في المعصية. So this hadith, it mentioned the Prophet ﷺ had stated لا نظر في المعصية, that there's no vow, no oath in معصية. وكفارته كفارة اليمين, and the expiation is the expiation of yamin. So they mentioned that as for the focus is under the isnad. So the focus is under the isnad. When they mentioned an Ibn Shihab, yani al-Zuhri, who narrated upon Abi Salama and Aisha. That's the isnad, and upon the Prophet Islam al-Hadith. They mentioned regarding concerning that al-Zuhri rahimahullah ta'ala, or al-Zuhri Ibn Shihab, that قال الترمذي الزهري لم يسمع هذا حديث من أبي سلمة. الترمذي رحمه الله تعالى, he mentioned that الزهري لم يسمع هذا حديث عن أبي سلمة. So even mentioned that زهري عن أبي سلمة. So he mentioned that سمعت محمد يعني البخاري يقول, that Imam Bukhari يقول روى غير واحد منهم, that many others, many have narrated from them, amongst them Musa ibn Uqba wa ibn Abi Atiq and Zuhri and Sulaiman ibn Arqam and Yahya ibn Kathir and Abi Salama and Aisha. So others of the other isnad of this chain, the other turuq of this isnad, it mentioned in the isnad, so from az-Zuhri, pick up from az-Zuhri, there's a madar hadith ola Zuhri. Zuhri and other isnad mentioned, as Imam Bukhari mentioned, Zuhri actually narrate this hadith, and on Sulaiman ibn Arqam, upon Yahya ibn Abi Kathir, on Abi Salama and Aisha. So between Zuhri and Abi Salama, two narrators. But they mentioned that Az-Zuhri, who died 125, min talamiz Abi Salama. So Zuhri is one of the students of Abi Salama. But in this case, so sometimes he narrates, so he's of his students, Zuhri, so he can narrate upon him directly from what you have heard. And Abi Salama, that they mentioned, is this one of the teachers of Zuhri. But in this case, Zuhri narrate upon him directly, we meant to narrate upon him by saying, and Zuhri and Abi Salama and Aisha al-Hadith. But between, in this case, there's others between them. So dallasa. So he made it seem as if he heard this hadith directly upon Abi Salama, who's his teacher, but in the reality is that he didn't. There's two others between them, Sulaiman ibn Arqam and also Yahya ibn Abi Kathir. So that's concerning an example of Tadlīs, Al-Isnad. So with Tadlīs Al-Isnad, with this discussion inshallah ta'ala, that they mention a farq bayna Tadlīs Al-Isnad wa inqita. What's the difference between Tadlīs Al-Isnad wal inqita? So they mentioned that of the farq concerning that with Tadlīs Al-Isnad, that the person who's doing the Tadlīs, he did hear from a sheikh, did meet his sheikh, did. So there's a meeting, an exchange that have occurred between the student and the teacher. Zuhri and Abi Salama. Zuhri student, Abi Salama or Abu Salama, the teacher. So they both met. But so Zuhri is allowed to narrate upon him directly. But in this case, that some hadith he heard through others, going back to Abi Salama. Not directly upon his teacher, but through a wasita, through a third party. So sometimes he may mention or make it seems that he heard that hadith upon his sheikh directly, but the reality is not the case. That's not the reality. So that's concerning but with inqita, that the teacher and the student, that narrator and that person that is narrated upon, there was no meeting between that day. They didn't meet. They did not meet at all. So that one becomes a clear breakage with inqita. It is jali, is zahir, that both that teacher and student did not meet at all. That person that is narrated upon, that other person, that there's a breakage between them, a time gap between both. But as for a Tadlīs, there was some form of meeting. Both met. So that's concerning that. And also with Tadlīs, that the narrator used words that he doesn't fall into kadhib. So it's not a form of lying. That's why I use the word an, waqal. So those words an, waqal, that it could go, that it could mean he heard directly or not. So it has that ihtimal. It has that possibility. So that's concerning of this matter regarding the difference between al-inqita and Tadlīs. So at times the person might hear the hadith, for example, Zuhri heard the hadith directly from his sheikh, and he mentioned it as that, and another time he did not. He heard through a third party, another narrator. So with that, inshallah ta'ala, we'll end this session and continue a next session regarding this discussion. So inshallah ta'ala, as we mentioned, a Tadlīs requires a few sessions. So this will be the first. We discuss some matters regarding a Tadlīs, its meaning, lugatan, istilahan. Also we discuss with Tadlīs, it have different categories. Tadlīs into 2 or 3. So we have discussed those of the ulama who divide them into different categories. And inshallah ta'ala, we start discussing a Tadlīs al-Isnad. And we'll continue discussion with the other categories in the upcoming session. Wabillahi ta'ala.